kick off just firstly and warmly by saying a very warm welcome to you, Deborah. Thank you so much for giving up some time today. I would love to hear a little bit more about your own background, your own story. So you're CEO of Now Teach. Can you tell us a little bit about how, your own career and how you come into that?
Absolutely. Well, I was nodding away when Penny was saying that, is it easy to transition from a corporate background, and that teaching had always been something that she'd rather liked, because that really chimed with me. I had always thought that in that sliding doors way, that if I hadn't done what I did, which was leave university and go straight into advertising and marketing, I would probably have been a teacher. And so it was always there in the back of my mind, but I felt it was something that I had long since, missed the opportunity to go into. I moved into teaching, and I'll talk a little bit about how I did that, because I think that might be interesting. But the why is also interesting. So I got to a stage where I was pretty senior in my career, but I was finding it less and less exciting and challenging and interesting, really. So from the outside, it was a great job. I had nice colleagues. I was, well remunerated. I traveled a lot. But the longer, and at first that was very exciting when I got to that level of seniority where I could do all of those things. But after a while, I just felt that I was confronting the same issues time and time again. And I just really was yearning for some kind of change, some kind of learning adventure, I suppose. And I tried doing extra courses. I'd done extra master's degrees over the years. But all the time there was this feeling that, and increasingly, as I got older and more senior in my career, that feeling that I'd seen things before and that I wasn't that committed or interested in doing them. So I felt probably in my 50s, I got to the stage where I felt there was this deep-seated sense that I was really, had reached the end of the road with it. I couldn't summon up enthusiasm. And I used to say, recently I've said to people, they literally couldn't pay me enough to do it because I just couldn't get interested in it. There's nothing wrong with it. It was a great job in lots of ways, but I'd done it too long. And I think, for most of us nowadays, we're going to have, we're anticipating working for much longer than, say, our grandparents did, or even our parents. I think sticking at one thing, even if you have different roles within that one thing, one world, is just not really challenging enough for us. So I was looking, there was an itch that needed to be scratched. Teaching was in the back of my mind. And then one day I woke up and heard Lucy Kellaway on Radio 4 talking about, on the Today programme, talking about how she'd given up her fantastic sounding job as a Financial Times columnist and was becoming a maths teacher and was setting up a charity to do that. So my husband actually turned to me and said, that sounds like your kind of thing. And I thought, yes, it really is. So I immediately went on the website and applied. And I wish I could tell you that I was the brave person who then chucked in my, glamorous traveling career and did it, but I didn't. What I did was think, okay, am I ready yet? Is this the right time? And I deferred for, I didn't actually do the teacher training for 2 years because I'm not a jumping off the highest board in the diving pool kind of a person. I needed a little bit of help to do it. Yeah. And the help came in the form of change, which happens anyway when you're in your 50s in an advertising agency and somebody needs to cut costs very quickly. A whole tier of us were offered redundancies. So that came. Yeah. But even then, that wasn't enough. I jumped to the next lily pad, the next nearest lily pad, which was consultancy. And I did quite well at that. But again, it was the same sort of work and it wasn't a big enough challenge. It was a bit better, but it wasn't enough. And so this itch to do this thing, teaching, which I'd always been really interested in, I always really wanted to teach English. My own English teacher was, you know, one of those teachers that you just remember forever. You know, I adored her, and she changed my life actually by believing in me at a stage. So I had a very positive view of teachers. And it was only really when I made that sort of semi-jump into consultancy that I thought, this isn't far enough. I need an adventure. I need to do something where I'm really learning. And then I got back in touch with Now Teach and joined that cohort. And yet again, I'm also, as well as not being very brave, I'm painting myself in a very favorable light here. I'm also a bit lazy. So there is no way I would have, you know, of my own initiative, consulted a teacher training agency, decided whether to do a PGCE or any of that sort of, the palaver of it would have put me right off. But Now Teach just made that seamless to me. So and at each stage I could think to myself, oh, well, if I don't get through this, you know, I'll just carry on doing what I'm doing. And at each stage I'd get through it. And before I knew it, almost, without it really occurring to me, I'd done a UCAS application. If anybody had mentioned the word UCAS to me, I would have run a mile initially. I'd done the literacy and numeracy test. I'd found my O-level certificates, you know, which frankly were virtually on papyrus. They were so old. And I'd gone through all of these hoops that you have to go through. But almost sort of, I'd been taken by the hand through them. And before I knew it, there I was in a school in Hackney doing a kind of audition lesson to 35 year 8s on the Gothic novel. And then I was teaching in Hackney and did that for a few years. And I really, it was tough. The transition from corporate life is not tough in terms of the process, but it can be tough in terms of other aspects of it. In fact, you know, I didn't think I'd have a big problem being less experienced than much younger people. I didn't really actually have a problem with that. I did have a bit of a problem initially, because I'd come from quite a senior management position, looking at how the school was run and thinking, no, this doesn't work. But of course, you know, you don't want to be that person who, you know, from the lowest rung of the school. Schools are very hierarchical, much more hierarchical than I was used to in the creative industries. And certainly you can't, whereas, you know, there were CEOs of big international global blue chip businesses that I was working with, whose offices I could have strolled into and, you know, at the drop of a hat. You can't do that with a head teacher. They're very hierarchical. So, you know, you have to kind of slightly swallow your opinions on things and just focus on the really, which is getting good at teaching. And once you've actually got through those initial kind of things that don't quite, that jar a little, you're surrounded by people who are teachers. So they want to teach, and they want to teach you how to be a teacher. So you get loads of support from the staff room. The kids are fantastic. And I can absolutely 100% report you are never bored. It's a very exhilarating, something of a roller coaster ride, I would say, in the first year. Second year gets a bit better. Third year, you suddenly, it starts to click. It's a bit like learning to drive. There's so many different bits, and then suddenly you stop thinking about it. So, and it was only really because I had been a Now teacher, and I was approached about perhaps taking over it, that I thought it was hard. It was hard to give up the classroom to do this, but I thought if I can get more people with the great kind of potential and talents and the experience of the world, of jobs that that are out there, that the other Now teachers have, then, you know, maybe I'll do a little bit of good in the world that way too.
Yeah, incredible. So, I mean, I think now's probably a good time to give people an overview and a flavour of what Now Teach actually does. What does the programme look like?
Do you want to have a go, Rob? My colleague Rob is here, so
yeah, sure. Hi, Robert from Now Teach. We essentially have devised a program from cradle to grave. So where we on your first,
not your grave, don't worry.
or maybe depends how long you become a teacher. So when you're first sort of looking at becoming a teacher and you're not sure what to do, we have people to help you get school experience, whether that be tutoring or whether that be actually in a school environment. When you're then applying to teacher training, we have a team of career change specialists who will talk through sort of different aspects of your career change. What do I want to be university based? Do I want to be school based? Do I want to be in a very strict school? Which subject do I want to teach? What financial support is available? All these things to consider, and what's right for you and what's appropriate. We then have a sort of a big onboarding process to sort of welcome you into the education sector. So a big conference in the summer. We have lots of speakers. We have other members of the cohorts, or previous cohorts. I think we've got 6 now, who will share their experiences, and they'll talk through lots of different things. And then you will then start in school in September. So and this is the really good bit. We have a team of program managers who will work with you over your early careers period, who will put you in touch with fellow trainees, so put you in touch with fellow maths teachers in Cambridge. And what happens is you form a network, you form a bond, and as a group of people, you come through your teacher training and hopefully, well, what we want is flourish, and become a fantastic teacher. The support we offer is for 2 years. We work with you. We don't actually provide the teacher training. Your training provider will provide the teacher training, but it's we all sort of work together, I guess.
Yeah, we find you the right teacher training option for you as well. There are lots of different ways into it. That's what makes it so complicated.
Yes.
To try and negotiate, I think, sometimes on your own. And I would say that when you're dealing with a transition of any kind, it's great to have people who know a bit more about it than you. And I found when I was in my training year as a Now teacher, it was just so invaluable to have people who were definitely on your side, but knew a bit more about the whole sort of school environment than you did. So I was able to ring up and say, I just don't know what to do about this, or what, whether it was very technical things like lesson planning or all of that sort of stuff, or bigger things like, I don't know, the SLT just seems so remote. How do I get in there? Anything really. I mean, it's great having a sort of mate on the other end of the phone and in person that you can download to and knows what to do. Yeah,
definitely. It's almost like that sort of support and hand holding.
It
so
is.
It sounds like it's a kind of a skin that sits on top of like formal teacher training, but it's this network of guidance, support and other people that you can kind of tap into, that really, I imagine what it does is it really helps people not drop out of the process.
Oh yeah, no, we have very low dropout rates, and also it's specifically we're specifically designed to help people who have changed careers. Yes. So one of our kind of real core beliefs is that that somebody who has had a career before is bringing with them into the classroom things of huge benefit to the kids that they're teaching, to the other teachers in the staff room, and to the school as a whole, and everybody benefits. I think that's the great thing. And you probably don't know you've got some of those skills, but if you think about some of the other teachers that you come across, some of whom are only in their early 20s, they're so delighted to have someone who knows who's negotiated a pay rise, or got a mortgage, or sort of knows how to has had children, you know, when they're getting pregnant. So there's a lot of the sort of soft life skills, but then there's the really kind of interesting professional skills that everybody, of which probably everybody on this in this meeting today will have different ones, but they're all of value.
So in a way, you've sort of prompted the answer to my next question, which is going to be, to people who are career changers, do they have to go through Now Teach? And I guess they don't.
No, they don't. Of course,
purely
it's, you know,
optional. Yeah, it's just a way of helping to navigate, form a bond with other people, like-minded, but getting that guidance as well.
Absolutely, and I think it does streamline the whole process. The other ways of going through it, or, you know, rely on you kind of doing a bit of the footwork yourself. We're much more streamlined than that. And as I said, for someone like me who wouldn't really have known where to start, it was really, and who would have been terrified at the idea of getting DBS checks and all of those formal things, it was brilliant having the system work
step by step.
Yeah,
amazing. So I mean, if somebody wanted to join the Now Teach program, what kind of qualifications do they need to have in order to be eligible?
Well, the basic qualifications you need to be a teacher in this country changed a few years ago when there was a big sort of period of reform. So you have to have maths and English GCSEs, or I think equivalents. I don't know. Yeah, that's right.
So maths and English grade C. If you don't have a maths or English grade C, you can, because you studied abroad. There's an organisation called ENIC, and you can get your qualifications checked against.
Yes, so you know, to make sure that they're of the equivalent level, and you have to have an undergraduate degree.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right, so you have to have an undergraduate degree, you need GCSE maths or English or an equivalent. What about funding? So how much does it cost to kind of go through the programme? And I guess as a supplementary question to that, what funding is available or grant support is available for people who might not be able to afford that?
Well, we don't charge anything. We're a charity. We don't charge anything to our, you know, our Now Teachers, but of course there are costs involved. So if you were to do a PGCE, that's sometimes that's 1 year, sometimes it's 2 years, so you'd have to pay tuition fees on that. What are they currently? 9 grand still? Yeah. But depending on the subject you do, there are bursaries available from the government to sort of, which are non-taxable, which contribute towards the cost of training. Now the government prefer some subjects. So, you know, in STEM subjects where there's real shortages, maths, physics, those kind of subjects, you can often get much bigger bursaries than if you were teaching. What's the lowest one, Rob? I don't even know. I think history's quite low down, actually.
History doesn't currently have a bursary.
Oh, it doesn't at all now. It did used to.
I'm sorry to say this to you, Deborah, because as an English teacher, but English is currently the lowest bursary. That's 15.
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
It can be quite surprising which has got a good bursary. For instance, geography.
Geography is a very cool subject these days. Kids in school love it because it's all about. It's not all about glacial erosion anymore. Apparently, it's all about the ecology and. You know, the social side of geography is very popular.
So coming back then to the whole bursary thing, let's say you are doing, you know, you're willing to do a STEM subject, physics, maths, whatever it is. How much can the bursaries kind of cover?
Well, when I was training, I do remember I had one of my Now Teach friends was a physics teacher, and I think at the time, these are not current figures, right? So, but just as a comparison, I think I got something like £12,000 a year, which just, you know, pretty much just covered my tuition fees.
Yeah.
And he got something like £25,000
Wow.
doing physics. And what's more, because it was physics, he applied to the Institute of Physics and got an additional top up of another 10 grand. So
Wow.
he actually, when he
was doing better than his previous job.
Well, no, he wasn't doing better than his previous job, but he was definitely doing worse when he started as a salaried teacher.
Oh wow.
He lost out by about 3 or 4 grand, you know. So but yeah, so it can be if you're doing the right kind of subjects. And there's also, do they still have the incentive for staying in if you're a maths teacher?
So they've removed, so the highest bursary with scholarship is now £29,000 a year. Yeah, as Deborah says, it depends which subject. They've removed all the retention bonuses. There are they're called levelling up sort of bonuses. So if once you qualify and then you teach in a school which is in a levelling up area, you'd be very surprised what classifies as a levelling up area. Houses on my terraced houses on my street sell for £750,000, and it's a levelling up area. So it very much depends on sort of, as I say, which subject and whether you're in a levelling up area. At the moment, they might bring the retention bonus back. Bursaries are typically decided sort of the October prior to applying. So this year, as I say, no retention bonus, but there is
and they are back they were back this year. They took them away for a year actually, which didn't wasn't very helpful.
There is the full detail of what funding you would get depending on which subject you would be teaching on our website.
Yeah. Fascinating. Gosh, it's almost like the inside edge. You kind of find it. If only you got this with all other jobs, right? If only you could go on a jobs board and they say, if you apply for this job, you'll get a bonus, or there's a bursary to do this particular job because it's in such demand.
Two years ago, when during the pandemic, a lot of people decided that they wanted to become a teacher whilst they were on furlough. The government reduced the bursaries because they had a lot of people wanting to apply. At the moment, fewer people want to apply to teacher training, therefore the bursaries are up. So it's the government's it's the government playing.
It's one of their levers that they can pull,
exactly.
you know. So they do tend to do that.
Yeah. They're fairly generous if you do computing or languages or geography, maths, or any of the STEM subjects. They are less generous if you are speaking as a history graduate.
It's annoying that it doesn't get. And also English. In English, if you're an English teacher, you teach 2 GCSEs because there's English literature and English language and their core subjects. But let's not let me derail things with my rant about English.
Fair enough. So then what about some of the logistics? So when does the programme, when do you apply for it? You mentioned before, Robert, that you've got the conference that starts in the summer. Could you talk us through the sort of the timescales and how that kind of application process, what that looks like?
Yeah, so we accept applications from September through to June, most likely to be the 2nd or 3rd week of June. And then people will typically start their teacher training in September. Some people's teacher training have even summer schools where you go to school to learn to become a teacher. Some people, they start in late September, early October. It depends on the course. And that's the nuts and bolts of joining. Deborah, did you do a summer school?
No, I didn't. I did do a subject knowledge enhancement course, which I was quite grumpy about because I felt my subject knowledge was pretty on point. But it was actually one of the most enjoyable things I've done. I absolutely loved it. Reignited, me with lots of aspects of the subject that I had sort of forgotten about. And also it was really great before I started teaching because it talked to me about the curriculum and what, how children learn, which was very different from, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth and I was at school. So So it's very different from that. Very useful.
And what about an application? You know, do people, you know, is it 5 pages? What does that process look like?
So we have a registration form on our site. It consists of an eligibility check and some questions about what you're interested in, which subject, for instance, where you live. We then have a CV, and we ask 2 questions about your career and about your interest in education, because we want to be able to have an informed, you know, quality conversation with you to sort of kick off the relationship between your career change specialist or your program manager and yourself. Applying to and as Deborah says, there's lots of different steps that you need to undergo in order to apply. There's the big hurdle is obviously applying to a teacher trainer. So there are lots, all their application processes do vary, but generally speaking, you need to supply a personal statement and a CV to apply to those. And generally speaking, they do an interview. Those interviews change a lot. Sometimes they do a subject knowledge test. Sometimes they do a classroom test, like Deborah was saying with her test class. It varies significantly. The key thing we try to do, though, is, as Deborah says, is simplify the process, because it is complicated and it is confusing, and it's sometimes totally illogical. Why, for instance, why do you need to find your GCSE certificates if you have a degree? But what we do is we work with you along the way, and we try to find shortcuts, and we try to you know, sometimes defend why they might do it. So as a subject knowledge, subject knowledge enhancement course, most people say they absolutely love it having done it, but you know, not necessarily what you would want to do when going into it.
And is all of the kind of the Now Teach support, is it mainly online? Is it in a physical space? Do you have to meet in London? Is it Birmingham? What's that side of it look like?
So we've got people all over the place, haven't we now? I mean, we are, for the last couple of years, we've been outside London. So we have career change advisors and program mentors all over the country now.
Oh, wow.
And actually, since COVID, we've been going back to a much more face-to-face way of doing things. But lots of people love working flexibly. They don't want to be schlepping into London all the time. We're very committed to flexible working as an institution ourselves. So it can vary a lot. You know, I think our program team will fit in with what people want, whether that's an in-person chat over a cup of coffee, or just a Zoom call, or just a quick text, are you okay, and a phone call afterwards.
Brilliant. So, I mean, I guess the last thing is just, are there any questions or are there any points that you want to kind of share and get over that I may not have asked a question about? And that applies to everyone. So Akin, by the way, lovely to see you again, Akin.
Nice seeing you.
If anyone has got a question that we haven't kind of knocked off on the list, I mean, I'm sort of thinking, you've spoken a bit about the transition. You've spoken a bit, hopefully, Jatin, you've been a bit inspired. Louise, hopefully it's given you some information about how this works and how it could potentially then fit alongside some of the adult sort of social or customer service stuff that you've done. You know, is there anything that's missing?
My question is quite specific to myself. Is my degree is in construction management. If I was to consider anything, it would definitely be geography, because I mean, it's an area apart from being interested, I know it's changed from what I used to do in geography, because I was checking my children's curriculum on that. Is there a possibility, I mean, shifting from
Got a bit of a bad connection there, Akin.
I think I got the gist of the question, though. So jump in if I get it wrong, Akin. But yeah, I think that's absolutely possible. I mean, not everybody teaches the subject of their degree, you know, because degrees nowadays are so various.
Yes.
I think you'd probably need an A-level in the subject that you want to teach. So if you've got A-level geography, you would be absolutely fine to do it. They'd probably want you to do a subject knowledge enhancement course. But as I said, that's actually really fun. It's a really good way of going back to school yourself for a bit.
Yeah.
So don't worry, nobody would be expecting you to be teaching building construction because, you know, schools but it would be really handy having someone like you in a school when you know, when they're always doing works and stuff as well.
Yeah.
You might find that they tap into your knowledge eventually.
And I mean, Akin's really orientated around children anyway. I mean, he also fosters loads of kids too. And, you know, so you've got a nice background, and I think reason for wanting to kind of.
I think your personal statement would sound brilliant, I think.
There you go. Any other questions from anybody we've not gone through?
So I was just going to ask about more of the technical side, because we've got the T-levels and things like that, because that is more practical, more my field, although actually part of my degree is in development, which is desertification, deforestation, etc., which is coming into the side of geography. What you would go in if you're going to go in through that sort of route?
I can answer that one. So T-levels are really exciting for me. Like at our conference earlier this year, many of our teachers were getting really excited about T-levels because it's a whole new curriculum and it's an opportunity to shape what the teaching of that course may look like for students in your region. So the key thing is that you need to have qualified teacher status to be able to teach any sort of program. So once you have PTS in your subject, then you can you can teach sort of GCSEs or T-levels, whichever whichever course is appropriate. We as a charity, we specialize on secondary rather than further education, but we do have lots of teachers who train at secondary with further education as part of their teacher training. So
well, I know our T-level college here takes from 14. That was why I was wondering if there was a crossover sort of period.
Yeah, definitely. And it's quite exciting having a whole new sort of area, because it's something to get you to. That was the message that our teachers were saying. It's something that they can really get into and build a curriculum. So yeah, we're quite well. Several of our teachers I know are very excited about T-levels, which I didn't really appreciate before going to the conference earlier this year. And that's the joy of the conference and the events, is you see different perspectives and you understand what's going on. Yeah.
Brilliant. And I don't suppose you know, I mean, Louise is based down in Cornwall. I don't suppose you know if is that a levelling up area?
I'm sure it might be.
Imagine there's some places it will vary.
It failed in its request for levelling up, although we have a college in Plymouth and a few other areas. We actually have worse poverty than most of the country, but we also have a lot of retired rich people. So we won't go there.
Very confusing, sort of the levelling up levy things. We had a few questions around sort of switching from corporate to teaching and what that might feel like. Deborah, did you have a bell in your school?
A bell? Well, we had what in my teaching school or at my home school when I was
at Mosbourne at your teaching school?
Yeah, we had. It wasn't a bell as such. There was a kind of there was definitely something that buzzed for break and things like that. And it was more sort of in the segments of the day rather than every 55 minutes or whatever. So you had to keep an eye on the time management is something that I used to think, oh God, it would be great if I'd learned some of these skills before I went into my advertising. I'd have been quite a lot better at it. You get so good at time management in teaching because you don't want to run into somebody else's lesson and have them waiting outside with bunch of bullshit year nines, so you have to be really careful about that. But yeah, only a bell for some segments of the day, and in some of my other schools, no bell at all.
Oh my God, I'm shocked. I had no idea. I just assumed there was a bell every single lesson. There always was in my school. Well, there you go.
No.
Eyes
There's
open.
clocks, but no bells. I think
doesn't seem-
some must have bells, I'm sure. But
I think that's where the Saved by the Bell. Oh, I relied on that bell. All right. Well, I mean, I think we've pretty much got through all of the questions that I wanted to ask. If there's anything else and people remember after the call, because you're anything like me, think, oh, damn, I wish I'd asked that, then obviously get in touch. I will be supplying, when we do an email out to everyone, I'll do a link, if that's all right, to the Now Teach application, because we're obviously now in your sweet spot for applications for your program. But other than that, just on behalf of everyone, certainly on behalf of other people who couldn't make evening today and for the recording, just thank you so much for giving up your time. I mean, it's an evening and it's a Monday, so I mean, giving up an evening at the beginning of the week, I mean, that's just beyond the call of duty. So much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you all very much for coming along. I hope you've got what you wanted out of it, but just let us know if you haven't, and we'll provide you some more answers.